Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, whenever you're joining us. We are live. Welcome. Hope you're all doing well. We are indeed live. It's Geography Revision live. I'm going to be talking through a number of aspects of paper 2 today. I'm going to focus on both sections. Section A, the work from lower 6, section B, work from upper 6, and indeed section 2 as well from upper 6. Now, what we're going to try and do is look at the structured questions. Remember, if you're unsure of the command words, evaluate, assess, explain, on the slide right now, there is a reminder of those key command words that you will encounter in paper 2. You'll see that section A, you'll have two 12-mark essays that will be assess-based. Section, that will be globalization and superpowers, by the way. Section 2, you'll have 2 times 6 markers and a 20 marker to explain, 1 evaluate. That will be diverse places. And then section C, you can see this is migration, identity, and sovereignty. 2 explains, a 6, an 8, and then 1 20 marker. So if you're unsure on the command words of explain, assess, and evaluate, you can see the importance of pausing this video now and learning those key terms. I will talk about a few of them as we go through. I'm going to try and give you some structured support focusing on superpowers in this session that will look at how we can assess, which is all about determining the relative significance of something, considering all the factors, then identifying which are most important. Again, more detail here. If you're unsure, I honestly think we spend a lot of time, and you will right now, going through content, but I cannot stress the importance of understanding these command words, because command words tell you how to mop up some of those maps. If you're not evaluating or you're not assessing, you are going to struggle to get those top levels. So remember, evaluate is the one that we often mess up, because we are trying to measure the value or success of something and actually come to a judgment or a conclusion. Whereas assessed, you're required to use evidence, sometimes some examples or case studies or sources to determine the relative significance of something. Reflective language is important when you are considering this idea of evaluating and assess. This is the type of words that we should see splattered throughout each pure paragraph. Therefore, yet, alternatively, however, concluding, overall, similarly, whereas, if you're splattering each pure paragraph with those words, you are evaluating, you are assessing. So make sure, read through some of the questions that you're doing or you have looked at. Are you using that reflective, evaluative language? Really important that before you embark on an answer, whether it be evaluate or assess, that you're actually making a choice, a position. You're clarifying from the outset what your case is, what your conclusion at the end is going to be. When you get to an end, you must have a definitive conclusion. At the start, you may want to draw out your main arguments and what you're going to do, which is sometimes, particularly in an evaluate question, setting out your case from the start in an introduction is a good way to already begin the evaluative process. Remember, it's fine. It's absolutely fine to give strengths and weaknesses. You've got to accept and recognize that. Think short term, long term. Recognize that the evidence does create winners and losers for different players. Bring in those players and attitudes and values and all those key kind of concepts that we've been looking at. Futures and uncertainties is always a good one as well. Avoid being simplistic, which is often what we find. Try and move beyond those simplistic statements. Globalization is good for the country. Try and be much more specific. Again, when you're structuring these 12-mark assess questions or 20-mark evaluate questions, always peel And if it's an evaluation question, as in a 20-mark evaluate, why not bring in that sense of evaluation before the link and maybe call it a PEEL, P-E-E-L, P-E-E-L, P-E-E-L. That will probably help you. These are nice little section structures here for each section. It has been suggested that the reasons include figure X shows us this. However, in other environments, both now and in the past, see that futures. With this in mind, it is evident that. That's a really good way of structuring those appeal paragraphs in an evaluate question. Or indeed a 12-mark assess. Maybe you don't quite need such amount of evaluation, but some form of assessment would be good. Avoid cliches. Obviously sometimes the odd cliche can creep in, and that's fine. But try and give some evidence. Don't just tell us that developing countries have a greater loss of life or greater injury when there's a hazard. Be a bit more specific than that. As a good example here, if you want to pause this, there's an example of a Japanese event, 2011. You might have studied it in more depth. There's a good developed point there on how you can actually qualify those kind of points about, actually, there are events that kill many people in the developed world. You're contrasting your cliched point above. This is it. The most impressive answers add a layer of complexity by deconstructing the word people, pointing out that it is poor people, women, elderly, who are more likely to die in tectonic disasters, other than groups because of corruption, poor governance, systematic failures. Can you see all the level of depth that we're going into there? Not just people, some people, there are people that, we're breaking it down. People is a very broad term. Okay, let's get into it. You can see that I was just trying to give you some background to how to structure questions there, but I want to move beyond that now and start thinking about, okay, let's look at a few example questions. Now, feel free, if you want, pause this. You can comment in the comment section, or indeed email me if you wish to discuss this further. Or you can post in the comment section your own version of this question, and we can all do a live marking session after or later if you wish. Anyway, assess the extent to which the USA's superpower status is threatened by emerging economies such as the BRICS. Assess the extent to which the USA's superpower status is threatened by emerging economies such as the BRICS. Now, here is an example. Now, if you are watching this, I would like you to pause it, please, and have a read through this question. Pause and read. Okay, let's go over this question. What do we think? Let's look at the start. There is an attempt to get straight to the point of the question. Avoid a meaningless intro. Remember, I sometimes say to you, particularly in the 12 markers, if you're not gaining anything from it, the intro is the bit you can leave out. 3 pure paragraphs and a conclusion and a 12 marker is better than wasting time waffling something generic. However, if you wish a little intro where you're setting out a case, then that's fine. 20 mark evaluate, as I just said earlier, an intro really can give that sense of evaluation. What is your case from the start can be good. Let's just look at this answer then. There is an attempt to get straight to the point of the question. The focus on control of energy supplies as a factor important to superpower status is clear. You'll notice that in line 2, 3, 4. But perhaps clarity is lacking. I think that at the end of this paragraph, a plan would have helped. The student could have added in a little bit more. The role of OPEC, Saudi Arabia, what about new resources? It felt like this paragraph started well, but the depth, remember we said the complexity wasn't quite there in this opening paragraph. So always think, how can I add complexity? And that comes from planning. Plan. P-L-A-N, P-L-A-N, plan. The second Peel paragraph, prior to 1991, Russia had been the traditional threat to the USA, dating back to the Cold War era. The USA is said to have won due to the fall of communism, as Perestroika has brought in and the Warsaw Pact fell to pieces. days. Even to this day, the USA and Russia are the largest holders of nuclear weapons, so Russia still has immense military and economic power through control of natural resources on which Europe so heavily relies. There would have been a good point for expansion there with some 2022, 2023 inserts. In the region of 80% of Russia's natural gas is sent through the Trans-Siberian pipeline. There is so much context here for updating this. Can you get in that wow factor of now, what's been going on in the world now? A lost opportunity here to point out the role of emerging economies. It would have been useful to question the political role of emerging countries when dealing with the USA or Russia. Or what about the roles of Brazil, India, and South Africa? That's kind of limited to economic factors. There's definitely scope for that paragraph to improve too. The third fuel paragraph, I won't read out, but hopefully if you pause it, have another read. There is a bit about core periphery ideas that links to theory, which is good. You can see where they've put, however, it could also be argued that this makes the periphery and the Western world the core, meaning they will never rise above them. That's good that we are linking to theory and the cyclical nature of superpower status is being assessed. That is definitely something to note. As I said, there is opportunity here to give that top level wow factor, current conflict going on, 2022, 2023. And then if we look to the very bottom here. So to conclude, the BRICS states do pose some threat to the USA as they possess all the attributes needed, such as large workforces, natural resources, and to an extent, military power. However, they're still only emerging, so the USA may still prevail, but only time will tell. A little bit of futures at the end. But a final assessment doesn't recognise the full range of points or the complexities. Some emerging countries, including the BRICS, may overtake the USA, but others will not. With assess questions that have the extent to which a fully developed conclusion is important, and I think it's quite clear from this that maybe it wasn't. So after talking through this response to that question, remember, let's go back to the question. There it is. See what would you have included? Feel free to pause. You've looked at this answer now. We've went through it. This is an average answer. 7 out of 8 definitely doesn't make the top level. 7 or 8, sorry, out of 12 doesn't make top level. There is clear ideas. The student clearly knows stuff about energy, military power, how significant they are. They are assessed. Economic power, as I mentioned, is not directly assessed. The role of emerging economies and international organizations is not explored at all. We talked a lot about the role of IGOs in emerging economies and the role of the current superpowers in controlling them, etc. There's stuff to be explored there. Knowledge and understanding is explored logically. There is some relevant connections, some factual evidence, although as I've said, it could be more up to date. Each paragraph needed to show clearly the significance of the factor they discussed. They didn't link the paragraph at the end, and the conclusion definitely needed to consider all of the factors. So hopefully that's given you a flavour of that question. Let's keep going. Let's do another. We're liking this. This is superpower, 12 markers. Let's talk through the good and the bad. Assess the extent to which the balance between direct and indirect superpower influence has changed over time. Pause it. How would you answer this? Assess the extent to which the balance between direct and indirect superpower influence has changed over time. You need to know about indirect and direct influences here. Really important. Remember, theory is all loaded up in that EQ1. There's a great revision mat that I've put out there, one of those knowledge organizers for EQ1. Definitely learn that. Let's have a look at this question then. Please pause this, have a read. Remember, this is the question. Assess the extent to which the balance between direct and indirect superpower influence has changed over time. There is our developed response. How do we think the student has done here? They've started off by talking about the unipolar world dominated by British Empire. Feel free to pause this to have a good read. They then went on to talk about bipolar world 1945 onwards, Cold War. The USA still uses neo-colonialism. Again, lots of key terms. I like the use of key language in here. in order to indirectly influence other nations today. I would have liked that to be developed. Tell me then, give me an example, e.g., for example. And then I think it's important to link back to the question here. The introduction sets the scene, integrates and mentions both direct and indirect power, hinting that both still may exist. Terminology is used, which is good, but the theme of the answer could have been made clear. You know, where are we going with this? Is what I would have wanted there at the end if the student is going to do an intro. That's where you would get some credit. Paragraph 2, hopefully you've paused it and had a chance to read this. They've started to bring in this idea about how India has been influenced by colonialism. Talking about how that was direct influence in a number of ways. Language in primary schools was English. The churches were built to bring Christianity. Sports such as cricket were played. This person's learned their notes. They've given us a real good range of the influence on India directly during colonial rule. So that's very good. However, would it have been good to have included more modern influences on India? Remember, we're talking about the complexity of paragraphs. I would have liked to have seen some globalization. Like, say, what about TNCs at the end? The role that TNCs now play, is that an indirect, modern way that maybe you could say Britain still has influence over India? Call centres, BT, Vodafone, O2, the encouragement of kind of, is that the loss of culture? The promotion, the indirect or the direct influence to now an indirect via TNCs. Next paragraph, bit of historical narrative. You know, maybe we could have had some influences and examples of kind of slightly more modern issues here. Somalia, Ethiopia, Eritrea, Russia, Ukraine now. Would have been good to, there's a lot of talk here about military, indirect, economic influence, global military presence. There's definitely scope for some 2022, 2000s content in here. Let's go on. They've kind of went for another paragraph that shows how direct influence has come to dominate now. So they're kind of following quite a change over time pattern here. Whereas I think dropping in, as I've said, the last two paragraphs, some more recent things would work well. But the focus here on the USA has directly influenced other countries, not to mention how the USA continues to exercise direct hard power in the Middle East. A little bit of that would have kind of, more of that, I think, would have helped to add significant depth to this bit. They've talked about the latter part of the 20th century, but they've focused more on, they have put a bit of IGO stuff in there, which is good, dependency theory. They are using key language, which I've always said use key terms. They could have maybe talked about the continuation now into the 21st century. Finally, they present the way in which indirect influence is spread and the importance of globalization. But where is the assessing? Are we getting assessments here? That's what I'm saying. You've got to keep the assessing going. And as we've discussed earlier, that's really key. Ongoing assessment. There was an opportunity to show how some cultures have reacted radically to Western culture, but you know, there was definitely scope here that maybe wasn't covered. So feel free to pause, read through that, read through the comments we've made, and then we come to another conclusion that this is a level 2 answer. 7 out of 12. You've got to say though, both these answers, if you can achieve with the small nudges we've mentioned in both of these questions, it's just about adding those layers of complexity to your answer, which I think comes through planning. Don't start writing these questions without planning. What else can I include? Plan those paragraphs. What figures and what points are you going to make? I think the student missed out on a few details and very much contemporary stuff. South China Sea, we could have brought stuff in there, particularly the issues linked to USA, China, Philippines in that region over the last few months. I think there was scope maybe for some more indirect power today, would have been quite useful. Okay, let's do this one. Assess the extent to which emerging countries need both hard and soft power to extend their global influence. What you can see I'm doing here, I'm using a range of questions, but each question we've looked at requires that background theory, EQ1 and superpowers. Know that background terminology, language, theory. That's what's going to take you through. We've had mentions of direct influence, indirect influence. We've got hard power, soft power here. Neo-colonialism, colonialism. You can see the language. Learn EQ1 well because it serves you when you're doing these 12-mark questions later on. So here's another response. Student response. Assess the extent to which emerging countries need both hard and soft power to extend their global influence. Pause it now. Okay, what did you think? What did you think of that answer? That answer, remember, it is stretched out and typed on quite a slide. It is actually quite significant. If you're to imagine handwriting that, it is quite a significant answer in terms of it is a decent length. It uses a range of countries and examples and references to key terms and language theory. The idea that Joseph Nye invented the term soft power, beautiful way to start. Let's talk through it then. Very strong definitional opening paragraph. The detail on soft power is excellent. For Nye, soft power is the ability to attract and persuade rather than by force. Hard power, which is using the military as a means of persuasion. Soft power is the ability to influence the policies of others through appeal and attraction. There are many aspects to this, of which the best known are the use of culture and economic aid to extend influence. That is beautiful. If your notes on what hard and soft power are, maybe if they are lacking, pause that right now. That is beautiful description of the difference between soft and hard power. Really strong content there. So yes, get that into your notes. This student has put together a beautiful beginning and understanding of hard and soft power. Okay, how do they progress? It is important to say that hard power is not really an option for the emerging powers, even the biggest of them, China. That is because the USA spends so much of its military than anyone else, so there is only one military superpower. To be honest, this is very strong, good AO1 knowledge, but I would have liked to see a little bit more. Where's the figures? Give me figures to just seal the 12 out of 12 deal here, if you see what I'm saying. All of the BRIC countries are nuclear powers. That is AO1 knowledge, isn't it? You don't always have to have a figure to show AO1 knowledge. That is good knowledge, which is a relatively cheap way of asserting hard power, if only as a defensive position and to give them a seat in the Security Council. Again, knowledge, which massively, AO2, which massively, they're giving an application of that, helps their global influence. Other emerging countries are much more marginalized and have no real choice but to use soft power. Again, that is beautifully structured. The student has started this very well. Maybe you could argue some figures to back it up, but the way they flow and structure this is good. Next paragraph. China is the most obvious economic competitor to the USA, and it is important to say that using hard and soft power is almost always about extending economic power. The USA has a poor reputation in some parts of the world being military regressive, which leaves the door open for countries such as China and India to extend their influence. This is hard for them to do it through things such as films and food, which is important to the US soft power, but they can do it through trade deals and development aid. China has been especially successful in Africa, e.g. Angola. Again, I think could have been extended there, where it has secured important access to raw materials for its companies. Okay, that's good. Another example is South Korea has developed links with Bolivia to help develop its lithium industry. This student is showing us very detailed AO1 knowledge, not necessarily giving us figures, but it is strong and focused. Each point, you can see they're not waffling. Each sentence makes a detailed knowledge point and gives a kind of thoughtful reaction to it in terms of an AO2 commentary. Now, what are the limitations of this, of military power as mentioned in line 3 and 4? Next paragraph. So soft power is an essential set of tools for the emerging countries And with Trump in the White House, they have plenty of opportunities to sell themselves as friends by contrasting themselves with a much more aggressive stance taken by the USA. So this was obviously produced when Trump was in power. This is a level 3 answer. The examiner, the chief examiner, gave this 12. They're saying both assessment objectives 1 and 2 were at level 3. This, for me, is a very strong answer. I have actually said there's a few places where I feel the knowledge could have been just given that little bit of a flair wow factor to guarantee the 12. But whether this gets 11 or 12, whether you think it is either, it's still a very, very strong answer. So there we go. That is a very quick 30-minute run through of how we should be thinking about assess, evaluate questions, what you'll be coming up against, some questions that you might now want to go away and write. There's 3 very interesting questions there. I'm hoping the examples showing you 2 strong mid-level 2s was helpful, and then this last one, a level 3. By showing you this style of answer, I'm hoping that you're now sitting thinking, I can do this. I have the knowledge. And the key thing for me, go away and learn Superpowers EQ1. EQ1 is filled with all that key terminology, theory. Know your theory and key language in Superpowers, and you will be able to implement it with your knowledge you've got in other inquiry questions based on case studies, countries, etc. Hope you have a good rest of your day. I'll be back with another session very, very soon. From me, Miss Cunningham, have a good one. Ciao, adios, I'm done. Bye.